everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled 2020 Food and Beverage Regulatory Trends, Impact, and Next Steps. I'm Susie Valdez of Lab Roots, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. Today's educational web seminar is sponsored by MilliporeSigma. So let's get started. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that this event is interactive, and we encourage you to participate by submitting as many questions as you'd like during the presentation. To do so, simply type them into the Ask a Question box and click Send. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the presentation. If you have any trouble seeing or hearing this presentation, simply click on the Ask a Question box located at the far left of your screen. I now present today's speaker, Justyce Jedlicka, Food and Beverage Regulatory Liaison at MilliporeSigma. She is responsible for engaging with influencers in the food and beverage industry to align initiatives to be the highest regulatory compliance and promote best practices among testing methods, promoting the safest and highest quality foods. For a complete biography on Justyce, please visit the Biography tab at the top of your screen. Welcome, Justyce. You may now begin your presentation.
Oh, hello, welcome everyone. I'm so very excited you're all here today and so excited to discuss with you our 2020 regulatory trends, impact, and next steps. Today's discussion will revolve mostly around the United States regulations and what's going on, and specific to the food and beverage industry. So we have a lot of information to get through today, and so let's just jump in and get it going. So before we get started, just a reminder for everyone, a little legalese, if you will, that the life science business of Merck KGaA, Darmstadt, Germany, operates as MilliporeSigma in the US and Canada. So those of you outside US and Canada, totally familiar with us as Merck KGaA, Darmstadt, Germany, and those in the US, you're more familiar with MilliporeSigma, but together, we all work together in the same great company. So today, just to kind of get rolling, we have a lot to go through. 2020 has been a crazy year in regards to regulations. So many key factors. 4 major buckets that I kind of came up with to really organize and kind of think through what is influencing our regulations. From a global perspective, we have the GFSI, the Global Food Safety Initiative, and I'm not sure if you guys have heard of this yet, but evidently there's this pandemic, COVID-19 going on. It's had a tremendous impact on the food industry, so we'll talk a lot about that. But life still goes on outside pandemics, so we're going to need to talk a little bit about some FSMA updates occurring this year. And finally, we're going to finish it up with the most important influencer of all. You, all of us working in the food industry and also consumers of food, what we think, what we feel about our food and how it's regulated and managed is the most important opinion. And just to kind of touch on some areas where we help influence what's going on this year. So with that, let's start off with the GFSI. So early this February, I was so very fortunate and grateful to be able to attend the GFSI Conference in Seattle, Washington. What a tremendous inspiration being around so many different food safety leaders with the sole goal of making food safe and high quality for everyone everywhere. Such an inspiration. 4 key topics were really discussed throughout the conference. Definitely certification version 2020, tremendous resonance around food safety culture, as well as hygienic design, and top of everyone's minds and still very relevant even today is the idea of supply chain transparency and what this means from day to day. So because we have so many things to get through in this presentation, I'm just going to hit on a couple highlights on the GFSI Certification 2020. So this really was a roadmap to really help and enhance and align all of the different certification throughout the globe to really make one structure that seemed to make sense and was the best path forward for food safety. Some of the key elements were an alignment and harmonization and simplification of the language, and alignment with ISO 22000, as well as the Codex. Some new elements that were really exciting, and we're going to touch on specifically, were the idea of a food safety culture, as well as hygienic design, and just a really enhancement and further definition of everything else that was in that certification in previous versions, just really kind of further honing in and just like buttoning up to make sure that they are the best aligned regulations possible. The GFSI website has tremendous wealth of resources, as well as guides and implementation strategies available for your use that you can work with your accreditation body to make sure that your certification is up to date and ready to roll. So the most important topic that really has been hitting our industry globally, but definitely as well in the United States, is this idea of a food safety culture. So interesting. What does it mean when we say food safety culture? It seems to mean something different for everyone. I found this word cloud on Food Online. And for me, it really talks about a lot of the things that come to mind on food safety. So as you think about it, food safety culture, are a lot of the ideas you're thinking listed on this word cloud? What else is missing? So I investigated. I found a couple definitions that really kind of resonated for me. So one of which was put forth by Safe Food Alliance, and they define food safety culture as a specific culture of a facility. The attitudes, benefits, practices, and values that determine what is happening when no one is watching. So for me, that means that it's one thing to do what you're told when you're told to do it and checking that box and you're good to go. But really that idea of culture really culminates when, what do you do when no one's paying attention? Is this something that's truly part of your culture? The FDA really aligns with this as well. Frank Yanis, in his new era of smarter food safety, postulates that strengthening food safety cultures also extends to the home. And FDA is working to educate consumers on safe food handling practices. So for me, the key takeaway here is not that this is happening just at work, and how are you promoting this at work to meet specific regulations, but are you taking this home? Are you a true food safety hero, a food safety leader? As you're teaching best practices to your family, to your friends, how are you promoting this idea of a food safety culture throughout? And then to cap it off, the GFSI also has a definition of food safety culture, and they define it as shared values, beliefs, and norms that affect mindset and behavior towards food safety in and throughout an organization. So really, how does this blend and marinate together to really create this rich culture of food safety? But at the end of the day, these are what these organizations feel. What's most important is how you feel when you go to work as a food safety professional. Is food safety culture at the top of your mind? Do you feel empowered to speak up when you feel that an improvement can be made? Is the consistency of how food safety culture rolled out consistently across your organization? Is the CEO or your lab technician or your line worker, is it a consistent and constant view and vision of food safety? All of these wrapped up together culminate that food safety culture. So at the end of the day, lots of definitions available, but what matters most is how this impacts you. And one of the most important elements in a food safety culture is really this idea of hygienic design. So much important was the GFSI created a technical working group to tackle this very issue. At the end of the day, their conclusions were really as basic as it needs to be the right equipment and easy to clean. So what they thought after tremendous review was to align with the European Hygienic Engineering and Design Group. They have published very specific guidelines on what it means to have hygienic design and very specific requirements. But basically, at the end of the day, the most important topics and pieces of it are basically, is it clean and can you clean it? And does it prevent microorganisms, pests, and contamination? If you can meet these, you've got a pretty good hygienic design. And it also needs to be compatible with any other things that are going on in your processes. Now, obviously, that's a tremendous oversimplification of what hygienic design is. But as long as you're eliminating those little nooks and crannies in your processes and your equipment that allow all of these offenders to contaminate your workplace, you're pretty good. So I encourage you to download the regulations. I have some resources here available to you to kind of decide, are you achieving hygienic design in your processes? The last topic of tremendous discussion at GFSI this year was supply chain transparency. Frank Yanis spoke and rolled out his era of smarter food safety. In it, he really talked about not just doing more, but doing the right things. So being smart about decisions that are being made. And one such element was really leveraging and utilizing new digital technologies, such as blockchain came up everywhere. Amazon gave an amazing talk as well on how they utilize blockchain and digital technologies to really drive their supply chain. It really does seem that people want things when they need them, and they need to have the information available, the right information when they need it. That this is no longer a nice to have, it's kind of the acceptable norm. So, and it's only going to increase from there. And then finally, at the end of the day, really, again, consumer demand. No longer is it acceptable to moms and dads everywhere to kind of see that, oh, cool, this is an avocado from Guatemala. Cool, this is an avocado from Texas. They have special feelings about what that means. Maybe the avocado from Guatemala is a special taste, and the avocado from Texas might be a different characteristic. For some reason, that holds a certain value for some individuals. They want to know where their food is from and where it's been along its journey to their dinner table. So they want to be able to be at the grocery store and at a click and a check, be able to see exactly where their food is. If you'd like a demonstration of a little glimpse into how this works, I would encourage you to visit our Lenexo booth in the exhibit hall. They have an amazing demonstration on how use of RFID technology can really hone in and increase your efficiency and in your labs. And just think, if we can do this in labs, what does this look like for the entire food chain for everyone everywhere? So as GFSI was happening in Seattle, everyone was notified COVID made it to the US and the world literally closed. But it's still important to mention so much of the work that's gone on that really affects and helps our industry. So I'm going to touch on some of the government updates and the work that's gone forth. Talk specifically about one specific industry that's really been affected, and then talk about going into the future and the increased need for environmental monitoring and sanitization. So, how many of you went to the grocery store for the very, very, very first time in March to bare shelves? Like, where did everything go? Literally, overnight, everything was gone. So many questions. What happened? Still waiting to find out where the toilet paper went. Crazy. And I'm sure we're all bored of the joke. But seriously, people were scared. They didn't know what to do. And the things that they were used to having were gone. So what do we do about it? Well, the FDA and USDA quickly went to work. This is just a snapshot into some of the policies and that they put forth to keep the industry going and moving forward. We couldn't let people starve. Food needed to be available, and we couldn't let our businesses fail. So with all of the great, tremendous support of the FDA and USDA, we were able to keep the industry moving. Some of the most notable pieces, as you can see, were an immediate relaxation on a couple policies to kind of let the industry focus, specifically on some of the on-site audits, a relaxation on that for this year. This was done in part to keep workers safe at FDA and USDA, but then also allow the businesses to be able to focus on their business, implement new strategies to protect both workers and food safety. And you can see this through some of the labeling policy changes to where they allowed restaurants to sell bulk food directly to consumers with relaxed packaging and labeling considerations, as well as the most recent with some of the nutritional label relaxation in regards to vending machines. But a tremendous amount of work. I would encourage you to look on the FDA USD website to just get a glimpse of everything that's been going on. It's amazing. So much could get done in such a short amount of time. But they're not the only ones who've been busy. The government has been busy as well. We've had 2 executive orders signed in recent months to protect the food chain. Specific in regards to the food was the DPA for the food supply chain, which really impacted the meat industry, which we'll talk about in a second. But measures were being taken to make sure that the food industry didn't fail. Congress also passed quickly legislation such as the Paycheck Protection Program, Families First Coronavirus Response Act, and the Coronavirus Preparedness and Response Supplemental Appropriations Act. All of these combined provided resources and support for the food industry and food industry companies to make sure that workers were protected, businesses were protected, and our supply chain kept on moving. But they didn't stop there. Every day there's more and more bills being submitted for consideration. I list just a few here that are under consideration. Of most impact, or you might be most familiar with, is the HEROES Act, and then the amendment to the Agriculture Marketing Act, and then Farmers Feeding Families Act. Those have been getting specific attention in recent months, and we'll have to watch to see how those end up affecting the industry. So, because of the executive order and some challenges and business in general, I call this the battle of the meats. So in mid to late March, employee after employee at meat processing facilities began testing positive for COVID, and unfortunately resulted in deaths. It was a tremendous setback for the industry in a very unsettling time. Facilities needed to close to stop and deal with the setbacks. They worked very closely with OSHA, CDC, FDA, USDA to really figure out the best path forward and keep the supply chain going, especially after the signature of the executive order. Progress has been made. Plants have started opening, new practices implemented, and changes in procedures. So again, the meat industry is on its way back up, and it looks to be they're making up business. Last I read, they were up to 90% capacity, which is very hopeful for the future. Conversely, the alternative meat industry seized on an opportunity. Earlier this year, they were under scrutiny on labeling and marketing claims. There was lots of debate on should they or should they not be considered a meat, and what did it mean to be a meat? But a lot of that was thrown out the door as soon as COVID hit, because there was a gap in the supply chain and consumers like the taste of meat. And burgers are part of an American tradition, whether it's made out of it's a traditional burger or if it's plant-based. So definitely an opportunity. And then at the end of May, we could see that sales of meat alternative products were soaring to all record highs. So the future for me looks like meat, non-meat, or meat alternative, whatever is you're choosing, it's ready to go for you and readily available. But at the end of the day, everything needs to be kept safe. We need to make sure that our food is safe. And then we also need to make sure that our workers are safe. So as far as keeping the environment clean and safe, the EPA put out guidance for a list of approved disinfectants against COVID, with the caveat to remember that the sanitizers that you use need to be approved and recommended for food manufacturing use. Still need to be safe. The FDA's guidance was that increased sanitization and frequency of cleaning would need to be implemented. And just as a reminder that anytime changes are made in your processes or your risk level changes in your manufacturing process, that these need to be documented and included in your HACCP plans. So the other element, not just your processes, is keeping workers safe. So OSHA put out guidance on how to create an infectious disease preparedness and response plan. It's very detailed, mentioning steps, what to do if a worker gets sick, how do you protect other workers, if someone's sick, does that make it an unsafe working environment, and just how do you mitigate that risk and organize your workplace so that everybody is safe and healthy and feels comfortable and safe coming to work. So I've been working very, very hard to make sure that everyone is protected and that we get through this pandemic safe, secure, and well fed. But at the end, life will still go on and we still have deadlines to make. So there's a couple things that have been implemented and are set to hit the books this year for the Food Safety and Modernization Act. Some elements dealing with imports, intentional adulteration, and then the lab accreditation program. So just very briefly, just some things, just dates that are occurring, but to be mindful of. The very last element of the Foreign Supplier Verification Program finally hits this year in July 27. Very small businesses will now be required to comply with this piece of the regulation. And this really is the last piece that completes the foreign supplier verification program. The last two pieces that were implemented last year will now be part of the program for this year. So just extending that compliance date for food contact substances as well as for cotton ginning facilities. Those are ready to roll and fully implemented for this year. The final piece is the voluntary qualified importer program. They have extended the application deadline to July 31st. This is mostly due because of the COVID pandemic. It was very challenging for accreditation bodies to go and visit and conduct on-site audits internationally to really verify that these importers are safe and in compliance. Therefore, the deadline has been extended. At the July 31st date, the portal will close for review, and then benefits will start rolling out in October of this year. One topic of specific evolution is the lab accreditation program. This was an element that was included as part of FSMA that stated that labs that were for final release testing of food products needed to be an accredited lab by an accreditation body. However, it was never established what did it mean to be an accreditation body and what does an accredited lab mean exactly. So the FDA put out for public comments. Those comments are still open until July 6th. To find out what's already in place, how does the industry feel about this, what does the industry want, need, just really capturing feedback. What the FDA would like to do is propose a framework and requirements for what does it mean to be an accreditation body, and also what are the steps and requirements needed for labs that are looking to be accredited. Now, what is nice that is occurring is that they don't want to reinvent the wheel. They want to work with programs and policies and practices that are already in place so that what is established is both familiar and comfortable and doesn't inhibit business. So they really are incorporating all of the comments to really create the best program possible without starting over. At the end of the day, though, they still would like to be focused on three major pieces. They want to make sure that they are always informed on the testing results, on what is going on. They want to maintain oversight of the program. And then finally, they still want the ability to be able to conduct audits and investigations as needed. So more will be coming in the next couple months on this topic, and hopefully we'll get some new guidance and regulations in the later coming months of this year. The final topic with FSMA that really hits home for a lot of us is this intentional adulteration. I know last year there was a lot of press on adulterated olive oil, or counterfeit olive oil, actually, and what that meant. But then also there was an identification that our food supply chain in the U.S. might be vulnerable and open for attack. So what do we do about it? These are very scary things. But really there's nothing you can do about it, in that bad actors will be bad actors, and all you can do is mitigate risk. So really the goal of this intentional adulteration program was to create a risk mitigation plan. Many of us have been working on our food defense plans, which need to be incorporated into our HACCP plans. Some sources of intentional adulteration include disgruntled employees, those seeking economic benefits, as well as foreign and domestic extremists seeking public harm. So very little control over these risks, but all you can do is mitigate. It's still a huge issue of concern. So that's why the USDA, FDA, industry partners, as well as the Department of Homeland Security and the FDA got together and really tried to decide, what can we do about it? They really thought the program, if you see something, say something, was really the best path forward. They have it open on their portal for food safety, so you can go into the portal, and if you feel that there is a risk that needs to be reported, it is open and there for you. And then on the right, I just have some, this is from FDA guidance, and the USDA also follows a very similar bullets on how things to think about as you're creating your food defense plan. Just some kind of steps, lots of resources available for you with USDA and FDA. So I would encourage you as you're developing your plans to kind of look through those as a resource. So at the end of the day, a lot of governmental and global influence on our food. But at the end of the day, again, it's about you and what do you want? So here are some topics that really have come out. This is by no means an exhaustive list. Consumers are very demanding. I know I am. So, you know, we always want something new and something different. So these are some of the top ones that the industry and consumer groups are really talking to. So we're going to really touch on these today. So one is this idea of reduction. We want to lead healthier, happier lifestyles. So really going with this sugar and salt reduction. The WHO has a goal of reducing salt intake by 30% in just 5 more years. This is a tremendous amount. However, they feel it will save 2.5 million lives a year by being able to reduce salt intake. Some of the recommendations are to reduce the amount of salt available in consumer formulations, having less salt available. So when you go to the restaurants, they're recommending not having salt and pepper at the table to having that as a ask for. And then also they are pushing for additional salt labeling recommendations or requirements, excuse me. So that's how they're thinking about salt. Now, the sugar industry is going a different route. Last week, they put forth a petition to the FDA to revise and review labeling requirements in regards to sugar and sweeteners. They felt that they were at a disadvantage in that many consumer products make marketing claims in regards to sugar and sweetness. However, there may not be sugar in the product. There is sweeteners in the product, and they would really prefer and feel that it is more transparent to the consumer to allow them to know that although it says that it's sugar-free, that there are sweeteners still in that product, and also the levels at which those sweeteners exist in the product. They feel this will make it a more even marketplace across the board because whereas sugar does have some health risks associated with it, so do sweetener alternatives. So just leveling that playing field, this will be an interesting spot to watch in the next couple of weeks as the FDA responds to the petition. So stay tuned here. Another hot topic, switching industries, is the salmonella petition that was submitted to the USDA. In January of this year, the Marler law firm submitted a petition requesting that salmonella be listed as an adulterant, similar to E. coli 0157H7 and shigatoxin-producing E. coli. It specifically called out 31 serotypes of salmonella that they considered, based on historical evidence of illness, the key indicators of risk. And as some background from the CDC, salmonella has the highest degree of risk in poultry and in pork, and is suspect cause for around 420 deaths per year. So there is some risk associated with salmonella. So the USDA the Food Safety Investigative Services responded that they would take this under consideration, and they did. They put it out for public comments. Lots of comments. Over 377 comments were received at the closing on May 22nd. And most recently, the Marler team submitted additional comments and context addressing some of the concerns that were raised in the public comments, such as it would be very expensive to the industry to employ this amount of additional testing. One, the testing didn't provide quite the end result employed, as far as it may or may not detect salmonella in the final product, that there was always a final kill step for the pathogen, and then also that salmonella, unlike E. coli, isn't something that is an additive to the poultry or pork or meat product. It's always present in the lymph nodes, and therefore there is less ability to control it being in the product. So more to come here. The USDA is reviewing comments and is set to put out a further response later this year. So definitely another hot spot to keep watch. And finally, I'm sorry I have to make the joke, but we're going to end on a high note and talk about CBD, hemp, and all things cannabis. There's a lot of misinformation right now regarding hemp and cannabis regulations. But just to set the very most simplistic record straight, in regards to FDA regulations under the FD&C Act, THC and CBD products cannot be sold as dietary supplements or as an additive for food for humans or animals. And then ingredients derived from cannabis that do not contain CBD or THC may be used if they meet all other FD&C requirements. At present, the only cannabis type product that is approved for human food use are hemp seed derived products. So whole hemp seed protein powder, and hemp seed oil. No other products have been approved for human use as required to be GRAS, generally recognized as safe, or as a new novel dietary ingredient. At present, this is the state and stance of the FDA. From a federal government perspective, this does not include any guidance or regulations from the states. That is completely separate. The other piece of this, as last year, the Farm Bill was passed, which gave USDA oversight over the hemp industry and also removed hemp as being a Schedule I controlled substance, which opened it up for further use. The USDA is working very diligently, creating a guidance and review on what the industry can expect and see from hemp in the future. They had open public comments, which closed in February of this year. And a meeting I attended earlier this year, actually in February as well, with the USDA, they explained that they would review all of the comments very thoroughly and put forth the best practices learned from the industry that really support the industry, and not starting from scratch, to really, what are those best practices that make scientific sense, and move forward with some of them. So they are anticipating having guidance out later in the year, Q4-ish. So definitely more updates to come there. So I know we covered so many different topics today, and it's a little overwhelming, I'm sure. But just to kind of touch base, regulations are being influenced at a global level and a personal level. So anywhere from the Global Food Safety Initiative to crazy things that you have no control over, like a pandemic. But there's also things happening in the government updates. But at the end of the day, it's really, what do you want and what do you need to make a safe, healthy food environment for you and your family? So thank you. I want to thank you all for your time today and your attention. I really appreciate us and your attention and being able to have this discussion today.
And thank you, Justyce, for that informative presentation. We will now start the Q&A portion of the webinar. And reminder to audience, if you have any questions you'd like to ask, please do so now. Just click on that Ask a Question box located on the far left of your screen. So let's get started. We have a couple questions from our audience members. Justyce, which regulation do you think will have the greatest impact on our industry?
So thank you for the question. This is a really great one. For me, the most important piece is really what's going on the intentional adulteration. There's so many different groups working on this right now, as far as AOAC has a specific working group thinking about what standards do we need to have in place? How do we even test for something we don't know? The National Institute of Standards and Testing, NIST, is also working on what are those reference materials that really need to be created, what matrices do they need to be in to make sure that we're really testing and able to have at least a response plan and put some science behind what's going on here.
Thank you for that. We have another question from our audience. What types of support does MilliporeSigma offer for these regulations?
That is another great question. Thank you for that. So we offer support, as you've heard in our presentations earlier this week. We're having increasing need for environmental monitoring. If you get an opportunity to replay Tim Sir's presentation on environmental monitoring, where he talks about how to implement your HACCP plan to really identify risks for the pathogens. We have tremendous microbiology support to really help identify and support those regulations, as well as if you have an opportunity to replay Matthias Nold's presentation on reference materials, understanding the reference materials play on for intentional adulteration, just all sorts of elements. And then finally, our Lenexo offer to really using digital tools to simplify your supply chain and just really get the right products and really that transparency into what's going on, where everything is, and when it is in the process. I think are some of our key big ones, as well as a whole portfolio of amazing products that you can find on our food and beverage portal site at sigmaaldrich.com.
Thank you, Justyce. And what a great presentation. I know that the audience can find you in the MilliporeSigma lounge right after our talk, and I want to encourage them to go there right after and also to check out the MilliporeSigma exhibit hall. But do you have any closing remarks that you want to provide the audience before we close today?
Obviously, thank you for your attendance. But then just to know, regulations always seem scary and just so overwhelming, but really they're just a way to make people safer and have a better path forward. And, it's not only the regulators' responsibility to make sure of this, it's our responsibility. So, any part that we can play committing best practices really just makes the world a better, safer place.
Absolutely. Again, thank you for your time today and for your important research. Before we go, I want to thank the audience for joining us today and for their interesting questions. Questions that we did not have time for today and those submitted during the on-demand period will be addressed by the speaker via the contact information you provided at the time of our registration. Thank you again to our sponsor, MilliporeSigma. Again, I encourage you to go check out the lounge and the exhibit hall. This webcast can be viewed on demand through June of 2021. Until next time, everyone, best practices, take care and be safe. Bye-bye.